Welcome, Mary. We're so glad to have you.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. I have to say to you, this is an unusual situation, but I can't believe how organized all of you are. You got this actually done. So I can't wait to tell all my friends that I did a webinar with the ARC. I'm happy to be here, and I am a member of the ARC US Board of Directors, and I joined that board about 5.5 years ago, primarily because a lot of my life has had to do with working for and with people with disabilities. So I want to give you a little bit of background, because one would ask, well, why would you do that, right? And a lot of people do ask, why do you do that? Well, I had a little brother, and he was 6 years old. I mean, he was the 6th of 11 children. I am the eldest. I'm Mexican-American, born and raised in Chicago. 2 wonderful parents. And the 6th child was born healthy and beautiful. But by the time he was 8 months old, he was stricken with spinal meningitis, almost died. My mother used to say she spent the night in the hospital praying and asking God to give this baby life. And she often would say maybe she made a mistake, because he survived, but was left very brain damaged. He was left epileptic. He had paralysis on one side of his body, and there wasn't much hope for him. This was 1950. All there were institutions. My parents refused, and so Bobby lived at home. And we all took care of him. But the doctor said he won't live to be 10. He's never going to talk. He's never going to walk. He's never going to go to school. And they were trying to encourage my parents to give him up to the institution. My parents wouldn't do it. So I grew up in this household with this little boy. And my mother was absolutely adamant that he was going to walk. And she did everything she could. She tied his feet to bicycle pedals and made us pull his little tricycle up and down the block 100 times a day. We all used to take shifts. She would exercise his legs. She would do everything. And finally, he wound up with braces on his legs and ultimately walked. She bought hundreds of penny balloons. Now I think about how dangerous that was, and taught him to blow them up, because she thought if his lungs would get stronger, he would speak. And he did speak. So Bobby grew up, and he didn't die at the age of 10. And we were constantly looking for services for Bobby. But everywhere we went, the answer was no. And I was growing up, and I was the eldest and constantly helping my mother, but she was consumed with this little boy. Why couldn't he go to the park and swim in the pool? Why couldn't there be a program for him? And the answer was always no. Now, I knew I was angry about that situation. I knew it. But I had been told that a young woman shouldn't be expressing her anger. I knew he needed services, but, we were Mexicans, Mexican-Americans in a neighborhood that wasn't too sure they liked us. I had a lot of questions about whether we even deserved the services. I knew I wanted to say something about it, but I felt uninformed. I felt unable to speak eloquently. And so I thought, I'm just going to sound stupid. And I loved my brother, but I didn't have the courage to do something to show him how I loved him. And I didn't know what to do. So I did what we all do. I became a member of the Governor's Planning Council for Developmental Disabilities. I went to all the meetings of the state. I met with legislators. I begged them, and I showed them pictures, and I told them stories, and I did everything that you do. I begged them. I used every trick in the book. And they would smile at me. And they would say, oh, yes, 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 we too are very concerned. But bottom line is, nothing would change. So in the Governor's Planning Council, there was this small amount of money, I would say maybe $250,000. And it was for new projects. And I was a member of the Governor's Planning Council. In fact, I was the chairperson for the planning committee. And so I thought, I have to apply. And I got some help, and I did an application. I submitted it, and it didn't get approved. I didn't know why. So I went to the director. I said, could you just at least explain to me why? I said, there are no services for Spanish-speaking families in the entire state of Illinois. Why couldn't we just do this one? This money is for new projects. And he said, my dear, so much need and so little money. And he just smiled at me and he walked away. I was too embarrassed to follow him and insist on a clear answer. So I came back, I met with my small team and I told them what had happened, and we were feeling pretty under the weather, and a young organizer walked into the room and he said hello to us. He knew many of us. And he said, what are you doing? So I explained it to him and he said, do something. I said, what should I do? And he said, kick their ass. And I was insulted. And I said to him, can you please just be careful with your language? And he said to me, so interesting that you're offended by my language, but you're not offended by the fact that the state is ignoring the needs of your brother. And I felt like somebody had stabbed me in the chest. I said, but I don't know how to do it. And he said, I'll teach you. And 2 weeks later, I was in the State House with 200 people. We forced the director to talk to me, and I gave him 24 hours to come up with $50,000. And he said, impossible. And I didn't know what to say to him, but I was so angry, it just came out of me. And I said, if you don't do it in 48 hours, I will be back here with 400 people, and I'm gonna double the number every 48 hours until I get what I want. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had an agreement for the $50,000. I was stunned. I thought, how could this have worked? I had done all these other things and nothing had worked. Why did this work? I was very tense about it because I was very afraid of what I had just participated in. I was vowing I would never do it again, but at the same time, I was overwhelmed with the joy that it had actually worked. So I began to think about this. This was the first time I had ever been agitated by someone, the first time I had ever taken some direct action with a lot of people, pastors, community leaders, neighbors, family members, my brother, all his friends. We all participated in this action and everybody felt wonderful. So here's what I learned. I learned some very important things. Number one, I learned that decision makers operate out of a sense of power. They want power, they need power, and they build power for themselves, and they use it very efficiently to their benefit. I was taught power was not something a nice girl should want, and I should stay away from it. So I did. I learned that power brokers and public officials operate out of a deep self-interest, something that motivates them to act. They understand their own self-interest and they understand the self-interest of others that they want to negotiate with. I never identified my self-interest. I pretty much played the victim card and hoped that people would respond because it was an altruistic thing I was asking for. I mean, it wasn't anything bad, right? It was, in fact, it was good for the community, good for everyone. They understood relationships, that there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies. And I just wanted everybody to be my friend, and I didn't want to do anything to offend anybody so that they might not want to be my friend. And I had learned that they lived powerful public lives, that they were out in the public doing things and building a public life. And I was home taking care of little children and sewing and cooking and just meeting with friends, but never doing anything out in the public arena. So that's what I learned. So I was kind of stunned with that learning. I don't know if any of this is connecting with you, and if it is, put it in the chat box because I want to talk to you about it. So I went through a period of turmoil of saying, do I have the courage to go out there or am I going to stand back? But I kept coming home to this brother. And he was only about 4 years old mentally, but he was funny. And no matter what I said or did, I always got the message that he was saying to me, this is great what you're doing, but it's just not enough. And he was right. So I began to build an organization because I suddenly realized that the only reason I had won that one campaign was because there were so many of us in the room, because we had taken over their offices, because we were threatening to double the numbers. And they didn't want bad publicity. They didn't want, I don't know, I wish I had understood the self-interest of the director at that moment. I don't know if he was up for review or what was going on in his life, but he said yes. And I know he didn't say yes because he believed in the need. He said yes because for some reason he felt pressured. And I was angry that I didn't understand that rationale, and I wanted to learn more about it. And I began to think about, how do I defend the civil rights of this little boy? And this is a fight, not a fight, but a challenge I take to the ARC USA. I say, are we a civil rights organization? So I want to ask you if you are a civil rights organization. I looked it up just so we'd have something to talk about today. And here's what the internet said, that a civil rights organization is dedicated to protecting. Now that's an active word. It doesn't mean that you're going to write a nice statement. You're going to physically protect individual rights and liberties provided by the Constitution. So that's one definition. Another is a civil rights organization fights for equality and social reform. Fighting, well, that's a pretty heavy word. But again, it's an action word. It's not a word that implies that we should write a position statement, but it implies that we have to act. We have to do something other than cry, whine, complain, beg, and act like a victim. And I did that very well. And I'm sure some of you can identify with me, because I'm sure many of you do the same thing.
Mary, I want you to know that the chat's going crazy. They're saying, yes, we are absolutely a civil rights organization. Amen.
Well, good. I'm glad. We're going to figure out if you really are a civil rights organization. Do you fight and do you protect? And if you do, then I say, hallelujah, I want to join your group. All right. Now I'd had many constant disappointments, and I had to begin to make decisions about my own life, because I knew if I didn't change, nothing would change for Bobby. Bobby's life would continue to be bare minimum. He knew his brothers went out. He knew they had friends. He didn't have friends and he couldn't go out. He knew that they were having a good time, laughing and having, but he didn't understand why, and he couldn't go and explore those things because of his seizures, because of because he had that paralysis, because of his brain damage. And I knew I had to do something. So I made a big decision. And here's what I decided. I would no longer be silent. Bobby did deserve the services. Didn't matter if I didn't have an education. I was going to stop worrying about whether I sounded stupid. I had so much anger in me, and I thought somehow I have to get help to use that anger to create the courage I need to go out and do something. And I need a lot of help. I need a lot of help. So I went right back to that young organizer, and I said, help me build an organization that can take on the state of Illinois. And he did. And he helped me, and it grew and it grew. Now, there's a lot of stories to tell, a lot of stories, and I would bore you with some of them. But I have to tell you, I did things in those days that I think today I don't have the courage to do. And part of the reason I did them is I was so outraged, so angry at what little my poor little brother had. And he was growing up. He was 16, 17 years old, still nothing for him. And so anyway, I began to engage neighbors, my family. I'm the eldest of 11. All of us were in the campaigns, every single one of us. The pastor of our church, the pastor of the church down the street, community leaders that I knew, business leaders that I knew. I just started going after them and beginning to help them understand that if I won, I could help them win. And if they help me, I could help them. And if we built some effort here, joint effort, we could all become winners. And we had this young organizer, and there were other organizers too who were agitating us, pushing us, demanding of us things I had never imagined I would be able to do. So I made a big shift in my life. And after several years, I decided that this is what I wanted to do for a living, that I had to be free to organize people anywhere and everywhere. So I spent 35 years of my life all over the United States and in South Africa and Great Britain, building organizations, training leaders, raising money, winning campaigns. I have to tell you, we didn't win them all, but we won most of them. And what happened is that these ordinary people like me, just ordinary people who for some reason have thought or have been told that their word doesn't matter, became sophisticated, successful, confident, relational leaders, recognized by decision makers. Now I have to tell you, decision makers never got to like us, but they respected us and they listened to us and they took us seriously. They didn't blow us off anymore because they knew there would be consequences. Now, can you create consequences? We have a big national election coming up in November. You could create so much consequence for anyone who does not hear you, that they would hear you the next time or lose their position. But that takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of commitment to change. So I shifted my life. And I did something I never thought I would do. I built a public life, just like these politicians. I built a public life, and I began to say, I too want power. Just, they have power, and power, by the way, is nothing more than the ability to act. Now, we've been taught some stupid things in this country about what power is, but if you look it up in Webster's, the ability to act. Do you believe that? You should believe that. Look it up in Webster's. Secondly, I decided I had to understand my own motivation. What was driving me? What was this rage about? And I began to explore stories about my own life and began to figure out all of the things that I felt were violations of basic values that I had been taught were good things for everybody, and how they were consistently being violated with no one responding to them. So I began to understand my self-interest. I began to be very relational, doing hundreds of one-on-one discussions with a lot of people, because I wanted to understand their motivation so I'd know how to team up with them. I couldn't team up with them if I didn't understand what they wanted. So I began to do that, and slowly but surely I entered this profession. Now I have to say to you, I'm a high school graduate. You know, I've trained bishops, I've done training events at Harvard, I've traveled all over the world, I've done incredible things that I never imagined I would do. Why? Because I had this blessed little human being called Bobby. He's the greatest gift we ever had. I came out of poverty, not because they gave me a job, but because I was determined that my life was going to change. My mother became a citywide leader. You know, she passed 20 years ago. People still talk about her all over the neighborhood. She's got a school named after her, a street named after her, and services for thousands and thousands of families in the Chicagoland area, all because of this cute little boy. Now, Bobby died at the age of 33. He was an old man, and his body was even older because of all the seizures that he'd had. Probably had a body of a 60-year-old man, but he died at the age of 33, left 2 very large operations in Chicago. I have daughters who are professional. One is a speech pathologist and one is an occupational therapist. And why? Because of that little boy. So sometimes people wonder whether a child like this is a gift. A child like this is a gift. And the question is, will you embrace that gift and do what you have to do to take advantage of that incredible gift? Now, before I go further, Kim, I'd like to open it up and kind of get some questions, if there are some questions or challenges to what I'm saying. Are there any?
Hold on, Mary, I'm sorry, I'm getting up here. Right now, we just have a lot of people going crazy about how jazzed up they are, and how much everything you're saying hits home to them. How our entire Life Like Yours Self-Advocacy Alliance is behind you 110%, and how they want to fight for equity and freedom. And
if anyone wants to speak directly to Mary, if you raise your hand, I am able to unmute you. Because of the large number of people and the way a webinar works, it's not just wide open. So if, I think Mary was asking if anyone wanted to challenge her or what they thought of the things that are being said right now. If you raise your hand, which is in the bottom of your screen, then I can unmute you. Until then, you can also write in the chat box.
Jill Eagle would like to say something, Tanya.
Okay, let's find you.
And RX Partnership would also like to ask a question.
Sure, go ahead.
For some reason, I'm not finding.
So RX Partnership wants to know, how can we work with other civil rights organizations to have more power?
Well, I think first you have to decide to become one yourself. And so here's how I think about this. I think that if you say we want to be a civil rights organization, then that means you got to protect and you got to fight. And those are action words. All right, so now say, well, how do we protect and how do we fight? It's not all that easy to just send someone out and say, go protect someone or go fight someone. You get arrested. So you need to be developed into leaders. You need to be trained into leaders. You know, I went to school. I'm a high school graduate, but I went to school. No one ever told me that I had to be active in the world if in a democracy. They told me how a democracy was structured. They told me about the 3 branches of government. They told me about what it took to be elected to be a senator, how old you had to be, and if you had to be born in the United States. I learned all of that. But no one said to me, you have a responsibility to enter into the public world if you want to sustain a democracy. No one said that. And right now, and I'm just going to give you my point of view, I think our democracy is in jeopardy at this very moment. And just given the vast numbers of people that are dying across the country and the confusing messages we're getting from all our leadership across the country, not just in Washington, but across the country. So I think our democracy is in a lot of trouble. But part of it is that we all need to be engaged. So the first question is do I want to participate in a democracy? And if I do, I must be a public person and build a life outside of my private home. That's number one. Number 2 is, if I'm going to become a leader in a civil rights organization, then I need to learn what it means to be a leader. And there are places to go to learn how to be a leader. I used to train. I trained until, well, I still sometimes do a little bit of training, but I used to train. I was part of a boot camp, and we had people in that boot camp for 7 days, 8 hours a day, just wrestling with how do you become a leader. And you don't just learn it because you went 7 days. Then there's practice, and there's more practice, and there's more practice, and then there's teaching. You teach other people, and you recruit other people, and you have to become someone who says, I want to build a public life. I want it to be an interesting public life. I want it to be fun. I want it to be successful. I want to feel like I'm making a difference in the world. I want to model something for my children. I'm sick and tired of putting up with the crap I put up with. Until you get to that point, then I think I want to talk to you, because then I want to say, you can become a leader in building a civil rights organization. I can teach you how to fight, and I can teach you how to protect rights. I know how to do it without, you know, I've done this for 35 years. I've never had any of my people arrested. Nothing bad has ever happened to anyone, because we're just acting within the structures of a democracy that we're permitted to act in. A lot of times we think that if we're nice to a congressman or if we're nice to a state rep, that they're going to be nice to us. No, they're not. They have a self-interest that we don't understand. And they're going to be motivated by that self-interest. What do you imagine the primary self-interest of an elected official is? What do you think it is? Does anyone know? Pardon?
To get reelected.
To get reelected.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And not the
Get
big
reelected.
picture.
The primary self-interest is not how do I provide more funding for people with disabilities. That's not their primary interest.
You're
Their
right
primary
about that,
interest
Miss
is-
Mary.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I have something to say. Your message about everything you've done in the USA for your disability service, wherever you're from, is inspiring, because I used to live in the East Coast and I worked at the Arc of Northern Virginia, and I'm still trying to get active with the National Arc of the United States. And I went through the, I know Steve Eidelman and Nancy Weiss doing through the University of Delaware, all that thing, but I think what you do really enhance the lives of everybody, you know, advocacy in the United States of America, and you go out of your way to implement change at the state and the national level. And I wish there'll be more opportunities within the government and all these DD directors for all self-advocacy, so people with and without IDD or with this IDD can get more active and involved, because it's a civil movement within the American with Disabilities Act, and everything you do, Miss Mary Gonzales, is so inspiring, and I wish I can represent the big picture to help in any way I can. I'm from New Orleans.
But you can do it too. You can do it too. Look, we have a lot of challenges. Let me just shape some of the challenges that you have.
Yeah.
You have organizations that are members of the ARC that provide direct services. They often have very large staffs. You know, people, the director, the assistant director, the director of development, the director of programs, the staff, the secretaries, the administration. I have a lot of people working in these facilities, and they're really good people. They really are. I've met many of them. But what do you think the self-interest of the director is? What do you think motivates that person more than anything else?
To keep her service going, to keep her business going.
That's right. So does she want a group of parents who are going to go and make the senator angry?
No, and she doesn't want anybody that's going to change what she's doing.
Thank you. So sometimes even the structures we are in are working against us. And that doesn't mean it always happens, but a good leader understands all relationships and is saying this is not working well. Right? I remember I went to an ARC organization some years ago, and the director said, I'm going to have a meeting for you with our staff, and then I'm going to have a meeting with the parents. I said, well, this is really exciting. So I went and I met with the staff, and I talked a little bit about some of the things we're talking about today. And there were about 45 staff people. So then we ended that meeting, we went and had dinner, and then we came back to meet with the parents. There were 3 parents. After the 2 meetings, I asked the director, the next day I said, well, how did everybody feel yesterday? And he said, the staff hated what you had to say. The parents loved what you had to say. Are you surprised?
No.
No. All right, that doesn't mean that the staff are bad people. It just means they're seeking to meet their own self-interest. And you don't have a self-interest on the table. Mm-hmm. And so what is a self-interest? It's a motivation. It's something you deeply want to see happen that's going to improve your life, or improve the life for your family, improve the life for your child. It's something that you will do anything to get accomplished. And so you've got to explore that in you and say, what is it? Now, sometimes we get some services and we say, well, it's not everything my son needs, but you know, it's better than nothing. No, it's not better than nothing. No, that's not true. That's not how the president feels, or the senators, or the state legislators. They don't feel that they've got enough. They feel like they need more.
We've got people loving to engage with you. So in order,
Okay, go ahead. Let them
I'm
in.
going to go with, just to let everybody else know to be ready. I'm going to go with Sean, and then Sheila, Stone, Richard, and then Charlotte. So Sean, Kirk, go ahead.
First off, I wanted
You're very low, Sean.
John, you're very low.
Oops. Hold on.
You're there. You're just very, very low.
You're better.
My microphone was not near me. I apologize. What I wanted to say was I wanted to thank you, Mary, for speaking to us tonight, and also as a liaison and coacher for a newly formed statewide Self-Advocacy Alliance here in Virginia. I'm learning a lot from you, and we are truly a great, I'm trying to think of, that we are a, whatever you called it.
You are a civil rights organization.
Yes. People with DD must be in the driver's seat. This is a hallmark of civil rights organization and represents a true commitment to people with DD having authentic power within our community and in our society.
I agree. And let me ask you, are DD people in the driver's seat in your state?
With this organization, we are working to make sure that we're in the driver's seat, making sure that we're at the table when it comes to decisions that are made about people with DD at the state level.
Very important. Now, people with developmental disabilities, they understand their self-interest. They're pretty clear on what they need and want. So they are the clearest, and I think you can recruit family members, neighbors, pastors, labor unions, organizations, go after everybody and say, if our life gets better, so does yours. So does the community's life get better. You have to get in the fight with us. And I think you do have to lead. You have to lead. You have to go after your directors. You have to go after your families and say, we are going to lead, and we want you there with us all the time. My brother, Bobby, he couldn't say much, but he went on all the actions with me. He was always there, standing right next to me, right? And voting with me. He often didn't know what he was voting for, but that was all right. He was having a wonderful time. And the way I always knew he was having fun is he'd have a seizure, because when he was having a lot of fun, he'd have seizures. But you are absolutely right. You have to be in the driver's seat. So thank you for your comments.
Excellent. And Richard Cuevas.
Hi, can you repeat your name again? This is my first time meeting you. So I'm a fellow co-chair myself. My name is Richard Gonzales. I've never heard from you. This is my first time, but me actually hearing everything that you're saying, it actually, like, I'm learning so much, because the things that I want to fight for is basically, and it's the same thing that I'm bringing up. I can't think of that lady's name that fought for everything that we have, that we're still going through, which is in Crip Camp. She said, yes, she brought up the word equity, freedom, and ableism, and those what I basically want to fight for, because each day we go through so much stuff that as we're going through right now, and to me it is not right, because speaking of like situations like the pandemic that we're going through, and not only that, but it's racism, cultures, and nationalities, is like this whole thing is going on. And not only that, but individuals with intellectual disabilities, they're being judged. And I'm just bringing this up, and I saw on the news how this kid has intellectual disability and he can't go to schools or can't do anything because of his nationality, the way that he looks, being judged, and so many levels, and it's stopping him from having his own rights,
right,
and everything.
Well, Richard, you're correct. And I'm glad you're here. And I think you've got to team up with the rest of your friends, and you've got to help build this movement in your state so that your voice will be the most powerful voice in the state.
Thank
I
you so
have to
much.
say that was my fault. Okay, good. I didn't lose you, Richard. Sorry about that.
Okay,
Thank
it's
you for
okay.
that. Thank you for those comments. And Charlotte is next, and then Reed.
Hi, Charlotte.
Hi. I just wanted to mention that so far everything about this webinar is going great. But one thing to keep in mind is that when you're talking to your elected officials, is to make sure you engage in mindful, that you engage in mindful listening, and because in the whole scheme of things, we are all human beings, and
Right.
and we should respect where the other person comes from, regardless of self-interest and things like that. So
Right.
we need to channel ourselves into mindful listening, and yeah, things like that.
Well, thank you. What is your name?
Charlotte Woodward.
Thank you, Charlotte. I agree with you.
Excellent. And Reed?
Yes.
Yes.
Like I just left a comment, and that like I would like to learn like some of the stuff that you taught over the years, because like I want to make a difference as much as you, or like as close as I can in my lifetime, and in Virginia, and like like I and very honored to be in the presence of you and hear what you have to say.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you very much.
You know, I'd also like to share, I've kind of lost it. Here it is. I was trying to read someone's. Thank you for that, Reed. Sheila writes that she wants to be a part of a movement, but not, and wants to be heard, but someone else to lead. I want a private life that works for me, but I do not want a public life. To me, it's a sacrifice. Is there space for that also? She asks.
Well, of course, I think I had a very, and still do have a very rich public life, but I raised 4 beautiful daughters. I've been married for 40 years. I have 11 grandchildren. I have lots of time to deal with all of that. You know, you got to balance it. It's like anything, you're balancing it all. And I don't commit all of myself just to the public world. I commit half of my life to the public world and half of my life to my private world, because my private world is important too. But in the public world, I get things done. You know, I use what I'm talking about, I use it in my church. I use the same rules in my church. I'm on a committee here in the neighborhood. I use the same rules in the committee. And so everywhere I work in the world outside of my home, I'm using the same attitudes and the same strategies. And so I feel like I get an awful lot done, and I help a lot of people get things done, because I have 35 years of experience doing this, and I've been pretty successful. So, and it all happened because I got into that fight a long time ago, and it was a fight. It was not pretty, to protect the rights of my brother. And because I got into that fight, it forced me to think about building a public life. But can you do them both? Yes, you can. And what's really great is a public life brings a lot of fun and a lot of joy to your life, you know, and that helps enrich your private life, because you come home happy, and you come home feeling fulfilled, you come home feeling accomplished, you come home feeling successful. And when you come home like that, you bring a lot of joy into your private home. So yes, you can do both. And it is I can understand why people might feel a little scary about it, but it's not all that scary. I mean, so imagine some of the state legislators I've met in my lifetime. Some have been really good and brilliant people. Some haven't been very smart, but they got elected. They actually got elected. Why? Because they went out and decided, I want a public life. I'm going to get myself elected. And they worked really, really hard and got elected. And then all of a sudden, we have to go talk to them about the needs of our DD population and try to help them understand. But they are thinking, oh, will this help me get elected? What will the other senators say? I don't know. You know, maybe I won't get support for this. I don't know if I'm going to do that. They're not making the decision based on what you need. They're making the decision based on what they need. And so that's okay. If you understand the rules that they're playing by, and if you know how to play the same rules, then you can have an interesting life. But if you're playing by one set of rules and they're playing by another set of rules, nothing gets done that will benefit you. They will get benefited. You know, it's always interesting to me, people who enter Congress, after a few years, they're millionaires. Oh, you don't get paid that much in Congress. How do they become millionaires? Well, because they have all kinds of opportunities dropped into their lap that they can take advantage of, opportunities you and I don't get. And so within a few years, I mean, my husband and I worked with President Obama when he was young. He worked for us. And he was a poor kid. He didn't have any money, and we didn't pay him much. And then he left and he went to law school, and then he ran for office, and then he was a state legislator, and then he ran for president. Now he's a multimillionaire, you know, because he's written books. He's done all kinds of things that have created opportunities that you and I don't get. So I think it's time for us to get some opportunity.
So Mary, I've got some questions here.
Okay.
Well, I have one comment, and it's from Karen Gregory, and she said her son has been on the DD wait list for about 15 years. They live in the country, and the answer is always no money and no services, and her son just can't fight for himself. So, and Virginia is notorious for long waiting lists, and so, you know.
Well, what does the ARC want to do about that?
Well, we are fighting, but I think after this, we're going to be doing a lot more.
I think you gotta, you know, you show up at the State House in the middle of a session with 1,500 people and you demand that they listen to you. They're going to listen to you because the media will be there. Everyone's going to be there. And you're going to say, you're going to hear us out. And this is what we need and this is what we want. And here are the consequences. We're going to get everyone to vote in November. And we're going to tell them that you have done nothing for us. Nothing. That's what we're going to tell everyone. And we're going to announce it from the pulpits of congregations. We're not going to tell people how to vote. We're going to tell people what you have done to help us, which has been zero. So unless you're willing to get into those now people will say, oh, does that mean that you're supporting so-and-so? Say, listen, I'm building a public life and I'm after this guy trying to force him to respond to us. If he responds to us favorably, we're going to shake hands with him and we're going to call a truce with him. We don't, you know, in the public world, there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies. And politicians understand this. Sometimes they're on the floor arguing and they'll vote different ways on one issue. And then they go have dinner together because they're friends. They just understand that on this issue, they disagree. We, on the other hand, if a friend disagrees with us, we don't want to talk to that person ever again. So we have to understand that in the public world, there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies. In the public world, people want power, and you have to want it. In the public world, people understand self-interest, their own self-interest and the self-interest of the other person they want to negotiate with. In the public world, it's a game of addition. You're building an organization. You're constantly in the mode of recruiting. In the public world, you're raising money. So you have money for buses, for signs, for everything when you take an action. And you're aggressive about it. Now, you can be nice, but you've been practicing nice for a long time. It's not getting you what you want. So, you know, this is not for everybody. Not everyone is going to want to build a public life. And nothing I can do about that. But I would suggest to you, I have to tell you this one little thing. Many years ago, a man in my profession who was older than I was, he said to me, he knew I was whining and complaining and not sure I wanted to do this work. And he said to me, if you make the decision, Mary, to enter this profession, I promise you a fascinating and interesting life. And 2 years later, I thought to myself, this guy's crazy. I'm not having a fascinating and interesting life. But now, 40 years later, now that I'm old and retired, he called the other day. I hadn't heard from him in many years, and he needed help. He's now 83 years old, and he needed help. And I jumped in my car and took off to help him. And he was very grateful, and he kept saying, Mary, thank you so much for what you did for me. And I said to him, Peter, you won't remember this. And I told him that story. I said, and you were right, Peter. I owe you big, because you were the one who agitated me, who instigated, who did everything you could to force me to make a decision. And I finally made it, and it was the best decision I ever made. So, do you want a public life? Do you want to turn the ARC into a real civil rights organization that fights and protects? This is the challenge I place before the ARC US too. It's very nice to have position papers. Who cares? If we're not prepared to fight for those positions, if we're not prepared to agitate someone, if we're not prepared to go after them in the voting in the voting booth, it's irrelevant.
I agree with you completely, Mary. And I have another question from Karen Smith. She'd like to know, what do you think are the 3 main priorities persons with disabilities are facing now?
Well, I think number 1, you don't have a voice. In the world, you do not have a voice. People, I watch the news, nobody's talking about people with disabilities. Here in Chicago, they're talking about how many people get murdered every day. They're talking about COVID. They're talking about restaurants who want to reopen. They're not talking about disabilities. And that's on a national level. And I know the ARC US has been doing a lot of good work trying to get us into national television programs, national news programs. Very hard to do. We're not news. And the reason we're not news is we're just nice people sitting down waiting for somebody to do something kind for us. Not going to happen. But you want to be in the headlines? You're going to be in the headlines every day if you decide to become public people. So that's our number 1 issue. We don't have a voice. Secondly, we're isolated. We only hang out with other people who are disabled or other families who have a person with a disability. We don't engage the rest of the world in our fight because we think it's only our personal fight and not a public fight. It's a public fight. Because just because we're developmentally disabled doesn't mean that there are other people who are not disabled. The elderly are disabled, locked up in their homes, unable to take care of themselves. They're disabled. They're not categorized as developmentally disabled, but they are disabled. You know, poor people are disabled. They don't have the resources. They don't have computers to get the e-learning that other kids are getting right now. So there's a lot of people who are struggling. And so they don't have to be DD people in order to get in the fight. Let's say, for instance, you said, We need affordable housing. Should affordable housing be only for DD people? Of course not. So you say, who thinks they need affordable housing? Well, poor people are going to step up. Senior citizens are going to step up. Large families are going to step up. Working class folks are going to step up. Latinos will step up. African Americans will step up. And suddenly you have a lot of partners and you say, let's fight for affordable housing for all of us, and let's make sure 25% of it goes for people with developmental disabilities. Now you're fighting for an integrated housing situation instead of an isolated. So we're isolated. So number one, you don't have a voice. Number two, you only hang around with people like you. Number three, you want to be nice. And you hope that because you're nice, they will be nice to you. So those, I think, are the challenges. I think we could talk about challenges of funding, of programs, of all kinds of independence and all kinds. There's a ton of issues. But until we face the fact that you don't have a voice, you live isolated, and you're too nice, it doesn't matter what the real issues are. I mean, what the programmatic and money issues are. It doesn't matter. I don't know. How do you feel about what I'm saying to you? That those are the three major issues.
I can't see her whole name. Hold on. Karen Gregory says, I love what you say. I haven't found any others that will step up except those that are directly affected. Not many will fight unless it personally affects them.
And it does. It does personally affect them. So how does it affect them? How does it affect a neighborhood when people with disabilities are not getting services? Does it affect them at all? Does every family have a person with a disability in it?
No, but I think everyone knows someone with a disability.
Yeah, and I would suggest everyone in the world has a family member with a disability. It might not be a developmental disability, but I have a family that I know very well, very good people, but the son is very obese, and his health, he's got problems with his health, right, because of his obesity. So right now, this is a big issue to them. Healthcare is a big issue to them, and he doesn't have decent healthcare. My brother-in-law is a really nice guy. He just lost sight of one of his eyes. So now he's not developmentally disabled, but guess what? He needs services too. And so how do we begin to talk to each other so we say, look, this is something we should all be fighting for. And you know what? They may not agree on the first time you talk to them. And that's okay. You got to talk to them 20 times. They have to see you out in public. They have to see you doing things. And then they're going to say, did you see that group? Did you see what they did? I loved what they did. One group that we were working with, the people in wheelchairs complained because they couldn't get into this one little restaurant that they really liked because it had one step and they had no ramp. So they did a demonstration and they got a ramp. In California, I had a town where all the bus stops, to pick people up, were also spaces where cars could park. So cars could park all the way to the end. And so there was a place there for the bus stop, but people would have to go in between the cars and around the cars to get onto the bus. So what we threatened to do, a lot of the people were, with walkers or with wheelchairs or whatever. And so we said to the city, to the town, we're going to get 50 gallons of red paint and we're going to paint the curbs ourselves. And we're going to post no parking signs unless you do it. And we bought the paint and they immediately took care of it. So, we have to confront them. And there were a lot of people who went to the city council and said, this is ridiculous. And they had photographs. Look at my mother trying to get on a bus. Look at my son in his wheelchair trying to get on the bus. And it changed. So we can do this and we can have, now, once you start doing that, people start saying, did you see that group? Who are they? And then you create a little publicity in the neighborhood. Look, we did this, and we're going to do this other thing. Would you be willing to come? We're trying to get support from the neighborhood. Would you come? They will come. But you can't imagine that if you send them a flyer, they're going to show up. Organizations are built on relationships. So you got to build relationships. Once you have relationships, people will follow you because you're going to become someone they care about. So they're not going to come just because you give them a flyer or because you send them an email. They're going to come because they've had a dialogue with you, because they've gotten to know you, because they've gotten to know your son. That's why they're going to come. So but you can start with the easy ones. Start with the parents, the grandparents, the sisters, the cousins, the aunts and the uncles, the neighbors. Start with those. The best friends, the coworkers, the people you know well. Start with them and invite them to an event and say, this is what we're asking for.
Karen wanted to thank you. She said, great response and thanks for kicking us into action. I can't control this board. I apologize to anyone that if I'm not getting to you. Sheila Stone says, okay, now I have another question. How do you show that it affects all of us? And I think you just reviewed that disability, Sheila, I hope I'm asking this correctly, that, disability does affect everyone.
It does. It affects everyone. There's an agency, I have to tell you, my mother had 11 children. My father died when she was only 50 years old. And so she was left alone with Bobby and my younger brothers and sisters. And she raised them, but she was just, my family was a very poor family. But she was the leader and I was the organizer. And she was the one gathering the parents and talking to parents and trying to fill the room. I was constantly talking to her about, Mom, we've got to fill the room. We have to fill the room. And she would fill the room. And I was showing her how to do it, but she already had some natural instincts for it. And she died at the age of 82. The governor, the mayor, congressman, came to her funeral. The bishop celebrated the mass. She was so well known, not because she was the mother of this little disabled boy, but because she had built such a huge organization that everyone in the neighborhood loves. Everyone knows this organization. I crossed the street last week because my neighbor was hit by a car. He wasn't killed and nothing broke, but he was very badly bruised. I went across the street just to see how he was doing. I visited with him just a little while, and then I was about to leave. I said, I'm going to leave you because you're still in a lot of pain. I want you to go lay down. And he said, please, please wait. I need to tell you something. So I waited, and he said, I am so grateful to your mother. And I thought, my mother's been dead for 20 years. What is he talking about? And he said, my son, you know him. I said, yes. He says, he's 16 years old. And when he was a little boy, we knew something was wrong. And we took him to the doctor. And the doctor said, I had to put him on medication. And I was so frightened because he was so little. He was 4 years old. He said, but I had heard about this organization for children who maybe were disabled. And I thought my son was disabled. And I took him over there. And they did an assessment. And they said, he doesn't need to be medicated. We think he's autistic, but we can help you. And they helped my little boy. And look at him now. He's such a big success. He's doing great in school. And he said, and then I just got hit by a car. And the first person who called me to see how I was? I said, who? He said, the lady from that organization was the first person to call me to see how I was. And I thought to myself, that's your mother working. And I just smiled at him. And he said, I'm so grateful. Your mother has made such a big difference in my life. So here's a man who never met her. She was dead by the time he was an adult. and he's about 36, I think, 35. He might have been, I don't know how old, 15 when my mother died. And somehow he recognizes my beloved mother. And so my mom dies a hero in the neighborhood, very well known in the city. She's a commissioner on the transportation system of the city of Chicago. Pictures of her with the last two mayors. And I think she was just a simple farm worker with 2 years of public education and no money. And she became a hero in the neighborhood. And why? Because she had this blessed little boy. And because she was fearless. She was just fearless. So that's who we have to become. We have to become fearless people and say, how much do I love living, and how much do I love my children, and how much do I love this person that I want to protect? I'm going to do everything I can, and I'm going to become a public person, and I'm going to show them. So that's who you have to become. You have to turn this into a real civil rights organization where you are fighting and protecting, and where you become prominent, confident, sophisticated, talented, successful, relational leaders that everyone is going to want to talk to. Everyone's going to want to interview. Everyone's going to need some advice from. That's what you have to become. And then all kinds of doors are going to open for you to do the things that you want to do. Now, it's not easy. It's a lot of hard work, but I have to ask you a key question. What else is there to do in your life other than this? That's more fascinating, more exciting, more fun, more successful. What is there to do in life? Is it television? Nah. So what is it? I don't know that there's another thing more incredible than building a powerful public life and changing the things that you want to change to benefit the people you love. And yourself, of course. Of course, you got to be a winner too. So I'm a winner. I'm old now. I'm 79 years old. I get calls from across the country, people who want to talk to me, people who want to interview me. I've been in a couple of books. So that's not so important to me, but people still know who I am and still pursuing me. And so I think to myself, I might be old, but I'm not dead. I might be old, but I still have something to say. I might be old, but there's still a fight in me. And I'm still prepared to go out, and I'm still prepared to get into a fight. Are you prepared to get into a fight?
Based on this discussion, this chat session, I would say we have quite a few people that are ready to take on that fight. Mary, I have another question. It says, how can the DD community ensure people with developmental disabilities are at the table in equity conversations at the local level right now? And how do we get that conversation going in a way that honors our struggle while honoring the struggles of others too?
Well, I think it's a constant process. So you begin with a group. You begin with a table of people. That table of people agrees that they're going to begin to work together to build an organization. Then they start making a list of 5 people they can each talk to. Who can you talk to? And what do you want to talk to them about? You don't want to go talk to them about, here's what's happening to the DD community. You want to go talk to them to say, tell me your story. What are you struggling for? What are the things important to you? Because you got to understand what motivates other people before you can pull them in. So I used to do 2,000 of these a year, just conversations. And I used to take all these notes, and I always knew in a matter of a month or so, I knew what 10 or 12 or 15 people were ready to fight to improve a public school, or were ready to fight for a stop sign in a corner, or were ready to fight about racism in a particular place. I immediately knew because I had talked to so many people. Then I could gather those 10 or 12 people and say, you know what? You all kind of mentioned the same thing. So let's talk about what we could do. And I began working that way. Once you've got a team of people who do a little bit of work, then they come back and they say, here's what I learned. Here's the issues people are talking about in our neighborhood. Here's the concerns people have. Let's have a broader meeting. Let's invite them. Let's invite 10 more people in. And you start thinking about, how do I get everyone to listen, not only to the needs of the DD population, but the needs of the community. And in the community are the DD needs too. So that way you're not segregating yourself and saying, we only do DD. We only talk to people with DD. We only deal with families who have someone who's developmentally disabled. You want to talk to an entire community. And if you begin to take interest in the fact that young people need a job in the neighborhood for the summer, our school's going to open or not? Is it a good thing? You know, what do we do about the stop sign on the corner? What do we do about those young people who lost their place to play if they can't go and play basketball anymore at that park? You know, what can we do? And now those issues, you engage everybody. Everybody gets into those issues who have young people. Old senior citizens will come maybe to support it because they want to see what's going on. Right now, it's hard. I'm doing all my organizing by Zoom. Everything is by Zoom now. But let me just tell you, I'm very angry about the environment here in my neighborhood because there's a lot of polluting companies that have moved in recently, and it's gotten really, really bad. And one in particular moved in across the street from a park, and he did it like in the dead of night, and the politician got paid off to help him do it, and the city didn't want to pick a fight with him, and so we picked a fight with him. But it was hard because it's COVID. So what we did is we recruited 50 cars and full of people, and we put signs all over the 50 cars, and then we had a parade down the street. And when we got to their company, we all turned into their company, and they panicked. They didn't know what to do. And so they closed the gates. So some of our cars were inside, some of our cars were outside. But now the problem was these big trucks full of asphalt, because this is an asphalt company, very dangerous stuff. The asphalt trucks can't get out, and the returning asphalt trucks can't get in. And we're just blocking everybody. And the media is everywhere. The newspaper and television, they're all over interviewing people. And finally, the police came. And the police were very kind to us because they knew that we weren't breaking any laws. So they came and said, well, what's it going to take to get you guys to go home? And we said, well, they're holding 10 of our cars prisoner inside the company lot, and we want the prisoners released. And everyone was cheering in from their cars and honking and waving their hands. And so the police laughed, and they went and they said to the man, open up the gates. And the guy said, I'm going to press charges. And the police said, no, you're not. Just open up the gate. Come on, open the gates. So they opened the gates and let all our folks out. Then we went to a parking lot, and by phone, we did an evaluation. People had so much fun. They were so tired of being locked in the house. Now we've done about 4 of those, and to different issues and different campaigns. People have a blast. They're just having so much fun, and the group is growing and growing. And we have to keep doing actions because otherwise the group dies. If the group just has discussions, pretty soon it dies because people say, oh, all they do is talk. I don't want to be part of that anymore. But if you're doing an action, then people come back because they want to know what are they going to do next. So we went and parked ourselves in the front yard of the owner of this asphalt company, and the front yard really was public land. Only he had created a big public yard for himself with bushes all the way around, which was against the law. So since it was public land, we went and took drums and chairs and everything and sat in his lot in his front of his house. So the next day he hired someone and they took all the bushes out and it turned into public land again. So we're having fun. And so could you have fun on a whole bunch of issues, not just DD issues, but just a lot of issues that are going on in the neighborhood? You'd first have to figure out what they are. You'd have to talk to people and say, what's going on here? If you belong to a church, if you belong to a school, if you belong to an organization, you have a place to start asking questions about what do you do here, and why are you involved, and what do you like about it, and what have you succeeded on, and what do you want to do that you haven't succeeded on, well, what do you need, and why is this important to you? And then pretty soon people start telling you their story, like I told you mine. they start telling you their story, and you start going, oh, I know how I can hook this guy. I know how I can hook this woman. So you have to be very strategic, and you have to want power. You got to want it really badly. I got so tired of being stepped on. I just got so tired that I just said, no more. I'm not going to do it anymore. So, more questions. And then we're going to get into a session in a few minutes to talk about next steps.
Okay, so Reed Eaton just wanted to share, you had said that, you know, the 3 things facing the developmental disability community was no voice, isolation, and wanting to be nice. And Reed said that definitely describes me. I'm nice, isolated, and only hang out with people with disabilities. I want that to be the opposite so bad. I want to make a difference. I want to make a change in my community and in the state of Virginia. So I think we have on for our next session. Let's see here.
That is fabulous. That's good. Congratulations. I'm glad you want to do that.
Let's see.
Thank you.
We have a lot of comments. We'll have to share these with you. It's just so much.
Yeah, we'll download them and make sure that we get to share that with you, Mary.
Okay. And did I miss any, Tanya?
I mean, I think of any of the big questions, I think you've got those covered. There were lots of other comments, kind of hoorays and yes and ready for the fight. There are lots of those comments. So I think this next section, in the last 15 minutes, may be what really answers what people are feeling in that chat box about how they want to get involved and how we really want to fight.
So,
right.
Mary, in listening to you, I came up with a list of things that I feel like that this group needs to answer, and then hopefully everyone in this group and people that everyone in this group knows, they'll reach out to, and we can continue this conversation. I want everybody to mark their calendars for September 15th, 2020. And that's when we're going to have a follow-up meeting. But first, I want to ask you some questions. Are you ready to make the shift? Are you tired of being patted on the back and told your congressman telling you that they would try to do better, that they were going to, you know, try to fund waivers, that they're going to try to do all those things? Are you tired of that? Are you ready to make some change? Are you ready to create consequences? Are you ready to own good power? Are you tired of being violated by a system that just doesn't respect you? And are you ready to make change? And I think one of the ones for me was, will you embrace your gifts and help us to make change? And are you ready to recruit for our cause? And I think, you know, I'm seeing all these yeses flying up. And, you know, I think if we're all ready to do this, you know, we can start making a difference. I always get choked up in everything I do. But I just want to say that, you know, I think listening to Mary will help me, and I know each one of you, but, you know, taking that anger, because I have it so bad, and we can take that anger, put it into something good, learn not to take things personally, set up a follow-up meeting, and really get some action going. You know, like, we go down to the General Assembly, we have 200 people that come out to our advocacy days at the General Assembly. And, you know, I think we need to be following that up with maybe a visit to their house or a visit to right outside the General Assembly steps. I mean, we can do this, guys. And I think if y'all will join the ARC and the new alliance, you know, I don't know if someone from the alliance wants to speak, but I'm so excited about having our alliance set up, and we have people that are ready to go, that know the fight, that can lead the fight. And I would love to see our alliance take the charge and lead the fight and follow up with us on September 15th at 6 o'clock. And we'll send something out. Tanya has all of your email addresses, so we'll be sending you an invite. We'll get together, we'll hash out our ideas. And Mary, we will rely on you for assistance and coaching and all the other things that we're probably going to need, because we are a nice group. And so
well, we got to change that.
Right.
I like nice people. I mean, I think I'm really nice. But sometimes I'm inspired. You know what? And when I when I teach people to deal with people in power, I don't teach them to be disrespectful. I
Right.
just teach them to make sure that they understand that they're peers, that they're equal, that this guy or woman is not better educated, not better informed, not better anything, just happened to decide that his or her career was going to be as an elected politician, while your career might be something different. It's just a career choice. Right? So they have to treat you with dignity and respect, and they got to treat you like a peer. And that's what we want. I always tell leaders, when we're going to run an action, the first thing we want is we want respect. That's the first thing. If we get that, then we can have a decent conversation, right? About what we need, what the state legislator needs, or how we could help him, how he can help us. Many legislators have come to our public meetings because when we could meet together, I would put 2,000 or 3,000 people in a room. What state legislator doesn't want to talk to 2,000 people?
Amen.
And so now I would take a team of leaders in to see the state legislator 2 or 3 times before the meeting and say, there are going to be 2,000 people in the room. Those people each have at least 5 relationships that they can talk to. So it could be 10 or 20,000 people who will be impacted by what you say at that meeting. So here's what we want you to say. We've already done our research. We know you can do this. So are you going to do it or not? And he or she has to tell us in advance, yes, I'm going to do it. No, I'm not going to do it. So usually the answer is yes, I will do it. And then we put a leader up in front of the 2,000 people, and the leader says to the legislator, this is our issue. Will you do the following? 1, 2, 3. And he says, yes, yes, yes. Then publicly they would shake hands. All right, we now have a deal with this state legislator. This is exactly what he's going to do. This is our follow-up. So now everybody knows what the next step is to move our agenda forward. Now, we did that in a town in California last year, and the mayor came, and the mayor was the mayor refused to come. He was a horrible person. And he refused to come, and he was a racist, and he didn't care about anybody in the town. But the people who were running the town were keeping him there kind of as a figurehead. And he refused to come. But the person running against him came. And we had 800 people in the room. And we told them 250 people sitting in this room are going to go door to door in these 2 precincts to deliver the vote. We're not going to tell them who to vote for, but we're going to get them out to vote. If you win, will you do this, this, and this? He said yes. He won, and that mayor went out because we went door to door. And then we had another team of leaders that made 12,000 phone calls to get people out to vote. And an elected official said, in those 2 precincts, at the last election, only 13% of the people voted. In this election, 70% of the people voted. And so we made a huge difference. Suddenly, the mayor wanted to meet with our people, wanted to sit down and talk about what he could do to make life better for the city. So what can you imagine that you could do? Now, I'm going to tell you the last thing, and that's that I am happy to meet with you again, but I'm going to treat you as though you're brilliant, and you're going to have to work really hard to convince me you're stupid. Because I think all of us are brilliant. Sometimes we're not given the opportunity. I thank God every day that I had the opportunity. I may only be a high school graduate, but I've taught at Harvard. So I've been given many, many opportunities. And the only difference between me and other people is I grab them. I grab hold of that opportunity the minute it steps into my space. So we are all gifted. You have to uncover your gift in this process. And I believe most of us don't have one gift. We have several gifts. You're going to have to uncover your gift in this process, and you're going to be agitated, and you're going to be challenged, and you're going to be asked to think, and you're going to be asked to actually talk to other people about something other than yourself. You're going to have to ask them about themselves and you're going to have to think about them so that you can figure out how do you pull them into your space to work with you on things important to you that can also benefit them. Okay, so I look forward to being with you and having a good time with you.
Well, and Mary, I just want everybody on this webinar to know that, you know, if you want to start tomorrow, you have an opportunity. We're going to have the governor. We're going to have a lot of important people with the General Assembly here to talk about the budget and the impact of COVID on that budget, and waiver slots and services. So tune in. If they see 1,000 people on this webinar, they're going to be paying a lot more attention than if they only see, you know, 50 people signed up. So get on it and get involved.
Absolutely. Are any of them vulnerable in the next election?
That's going to be a research question for us.
Right. And are the vulnerable ones, are they favorable to you or unfavorable to you? I mean, these are the kinds of things you have to learn to do.
Yeah.
To figure that out.
Well, Mary, I cannot thank you enough for
You're
being
welcome.
here. I'm very excited. I'm excited for everybody on here. These are my people. They are going crazy, and I know the Alliance will be the one to pull us through all this and get us really motivated and going. And Tanya, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
I think that's absolutely true, that the Alliance and anyone on the call, talk to your friends and other people that you know to bring in, like Mary is saying, you know, bring that other person into the movement. And so if you have a self-advocacy group in your local area, get connected to the Alliance. If you don't have a group, then connect to the Alliance so you can build a local group. There are lots of leaders on this call and others who couldn't join us tonight, who are part of that Alliance, and they really want to bring everybody's voice of the people experiencing the system, the people who have the strongest, most important voice, not just to the table, but to leading the movement. And so that's what the Alliance is about. We've far too long talked about being at the table as opposed to setting the table. I don't know. And that's what the Alliance is about, is making sure that people are doing that. So get connected any way you can. Mary, we are very excited to work with you now and to stay excited and our energy going as we get ready to talk to the governor and the General Assembly members tomorrow. And
good
all
luck.
the other things. Yes, thank you. Thank you. And as Kim said, we'll send all of you the information about our next working session, September 15th, to get us moving. So if everybody can, I wish I could just unmute everyone at once, but that's not possible in my settings. So I wish everyone could just clap and say, yay, thank you, Mary. But trust us, we are going to send you these chats from the comment box so you can see how fired up we are.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for the work that you do. It's extremely important. Don't ever give it up.
We won't. We won't. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Have a good evening, Mary. Good night.
Good evening. Good night.
Hey,